interested in how you told me the definition of hope, because
Yeah.
for me too, I had that misconception that, it's like just like rainbows and,
Yeah.
hope is something about thinking that everything's going to be fine later on.
Oh yeah, not at all. Hope is an ugly struggle and I
Yeah.
love it.
So I just
Hope is
want
here.
take us through like what goes through your head when you think about hope and how do you follow through it? Because this is quite a new concept for me.
It is interesting. No, it's a good question because I don't even think I realized how much the definition had changed in my own life. And so I think I was having a conversation with a coworker about this because they looked at my Instagram page and they're like, "Do you write about hope so much?" And like, but it doesn't seem like fluffy. I remember the first time it came up in a poem that I wrote. I just remember having that distinction of like, I think before that, I don't think I would have put hope in the poem because it just had that cloud pie in the sky. Doesn't really mean anything word, as I think it just has become. It's watered down. It's the only way I can come to it. But the more I've gone through these experiences and the more that I started speaking the word out, right? Which I think comes back to, as you mentioned earlier, the narrative. What's the story we tell? What is the picture we tell ourselves of what happened? What's the narrative I'm telling myself about what's happening? And what's the narrative I want to project out? In that narrative, hope didn't really mean much, but it became, to me, one of the cornerstones of healing. Anxiety in and of itself is based in worry, right? We only worry when we don't see what we want working out, when we don't see the better outcome coming, when we have experienced things long enough and in a sustained enough way that the idea that if you would have stayed here in Amsterdam, right, in that context, you couldn't see outside of it, and you had to go somewhere else to be able to have that perspective. Similarly, so hope for me used to be that kind of meaningless word that would float, a rainbow floating through a clear blue sky, right? And it's interesting because I've been called a person who perpetuates toxic positivity, which I took very seriously and looked into. And after I did some thinking, I disagree with it a great deal. And maybe this story, I feel like I'm rambling here, will put into perspective. I had a friend once that called themselves an optimist. I never really thought one way or the other until one day when he said, "Yeah, I'm an optimist. Like, I generally think the world is a pretty good place." Mm-hmm. And I think there's good things in the world, but I think when we look outside, we can see that there's a lot of conflict. And then it became that wonder of, if I have hope, am I just in optimism? Am I just ignoring the negativity, or am I actually engaging with it? And to me, real hope, the real tangible hope that we can hold on to, is to assume and think that good things might come even with the crap, even with the darkness, even with the destruction. And then also, when things are going really well, we don't really need hope, do we? You don't need hope if what you're hoping for is there in front of you. So hope is, as I said earlier, it's that fragile flame in the dark, right? And I think most of my poems that I wrote that deal with hope were my journey and have been my journey in reaching out in the mist, trying to figure out what it is in the midst of feeling terrible. And it's an interesting thing to try to explain. I don't think we can have hope unless we have despair and darkness. Because I'm a huge literary nerd, I read Lord of the Rings almost once a year. And the last time I read through it, it was really interesting because that is a really encouraging and inspiring, hopeful story. Yet 90% of it is just pure darkness and despair. And I think in the most inspiring stories, the hope is really just like the last page. It's not till the end. If you read a story where there was hope on every page, it would be really boring. And nobody would care. because we wouldn't identify, most of us wouldn't identify it, right? We read stories and love the stories that we do because we identify with the struggle. So if we take away the struggle, there's no need for hope.
Yeah.
Um,
I can imagine though, when you said that hope is not just that things will be positive, but also saying that there will be having the hope that there will be good things despite the crap,
yeah.
Despite the bad things. So maybe, I don't know, correct me if this is not how you see it, but could it be also reset as hope is having less fear of the bad things in life?
Oh, maybe, yeah. Or maybe hope is learning to not be discouraged when they come.
Yeah. So to be like
Right?
ready for it and having
Yeah,
that knowledge that it will come, but that you will be able to endure it, and despite that, there will be good things.
absolutely. And I think hope breeds the resilience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it comes across in simple ways too. Like we could talk about life shattering situations as well, but I think when I think about the people I see on a regular basis, before COVID, the people in the neighborhood and at the grocery stores, right? But now it's really just work in a few places. But works, regardless of where anyone works, it's always interesting because you get to see a lot of different facets of people. I think pessimists and optimists. I think we're all a little bit of each, but people who are predominantly pessimistic or versus optimistic, especially with rain. Rain is an interesting thing that I pay close attention to, especially in Amsterdam, because it'll rain for like 4 months straight here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the same people at the coffee machine in the morning, and the same people every morning are, oh, it's raining again. And they let themselves get really upset.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wonder, are they upset at the rain or are they upset at something else and the rain's just triggering them? Because I just remember thinking, we can't stop the rain.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually good for the earth.
Mm-hmm.
It can be annoying. Also, but I also remember thinking, like, check the weather app. We knew it was going to rain. How are you still upset? I just don't understand why people get upset about things like that. But at the same time, I think I used to be a person that got upset by things like that. Maybe it's annoying taking the extra 20 seconds to put on your rain jacket and pants, but I feel like I've tried to cultivate myself, especially not having a car here in Amsterdam. Like it's raining outside, and part of me now is like, okay, now I get to put on my rain pants, and it's going to be an epic ride to work today. But I think the mentality has just shifted, right? It's a more hopeful mentality that, yeah, it's raining. There's this struggle, but now it'll be an adventure to get through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's hope. It's the same thing. It's the idea of, okay, this didn't work out how I planned.
Mm-hmm.
My father-in-law is famous for talking about how life is a continuous struggle, but having this firm belief that it will work out in the end.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I've gotten to 60 plus years of age, and things have a way of working out. I think some people would say, yeah, but you've been successful. I would argue that he's been successful because his mentality has been that things will work out.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a choice.
Mm-hmm.
He's choosing. So he's trained his mind over the years to assume they're going to work out, and then therefore will look for things to work out.
Mm-hmm.
Notice when they work out. I don't know. He's the guy that gets excited to ride his bike in the rain, I guess.
Yeah. I'm currently reading a book by Eckhart Tolle, and he's like a spiritual teacher. And he also wrote The Power of Now, but I'm reading The New Earth, A New Earth by him. And he says that a lot of, like the unhappiness that is in us is because we look at a fact and then we kind of process it through our own lens. So it's raining. That's the fact, right? There's no emotion attached to the fact that it's raining. But what we do is that we put into that and say that's a bad thing, like it's gonna ruin our day. But it really helped me to kind of, when he said to just look at it as a fact, because for a lot of people who are unhappy, it's because they think that their own thoughts about, let's say, raining in this situation, they believe that is their reality, right?
Exactly.
They believe that
just their interpretation. reality.
exactly, that their thought and is the reality, but knowing, just even noticing that there's a distance between your own thought and what's actually happening. It's
It's
just,
nice, isn't it?
yeah, it's very
There's freedom in
freeing.
that.
Yeah,
It is very,
exactly. Yeah.
and then you take that into the mental health struggle, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm feeling it. It's different because rain is happening externally, right?
Mm-hmm.
But mental health is happening internally. But it's interesting that the same correlation exists.
Mm-hmm.
I think you even said this 20 minutes ago, is the idea of, I'm not depressed. In my head right now, I'm having depressed thoughts right
Mm-hmm.
now,
Right.
in that moment,
Right.
in that distance. It's the same thing though, right? In that distance, like, oh, right now I'm tired and not feeling very hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that it won't come back.
Mm-hmm.
And that objective reality is, I think that's a powerful thing. And that comes down to, circles back to the choices we make, right? And the narratives we choose to tell ourselves. Um, the next story I want to write after these are over is about that. It's about stories. It follows two characters as they navigate kind of this hellish dark landscape, and perpetually are reminding each other to reframe the narratives they're telling. I mean, it's all about that. It's about, their story will be defined by the stories they tell themselves. And I'm excited to scratch around in that sandbox, really, and
Mm-hmm.
play with. I feel like I've learned so much about healing just from writing these novels.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned so much about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've let go of things I thought were true, and I've come to different conclusions. And it's interesting, some of the realizations I feel like I've come to, and I can't wait to see what happens to my own thoughts in that realm now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I actually used to think that, like, the opposite of happiness was sadness. Now I think the opposite of happiness is anger, or joy. And similarly, whereas like hope and despair, I feel like anger is somewhere on that spectrum as well, which comes up in my novel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, I was very angry,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't actually heal
Mm-hmm.
until I let go of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, for the listeners, Craig is like an incredible writer. He has an Instagram account. I will like link down everything. Like he's gonna have a book that's gonna be published, which I'm so excited about.
Thank you.
Following the characters journey to getting to know himself and struggling with who he actually is, right?
Yeah.
But I'm really excited for that, and I'll like link everything below. You probably also have noticed that I've been reposting his haikus, because they're really about hope, and it's not the fluffy hope, it's a tangible thing that you can hold on to. So I will link that down below for listeners. But
Thank you.
you're right that you need to let go of that bitterness and anger in order to enter that healing process.
Yeah.
I used to be just really bitter about Amsterdam and just like moving there, and why that like I grow up not being able to express certain feelings, like having a certain resentment towards like the way I was raised and everything. But that was really stopping me from seeing things as they were, because as I said, I was looking at everything through my own like colored lens, my own biased lens.
Totally.
But once I really let that go, I could actually see what was happening, actually navigate through everything, actually see myself clearly, and my thoughts clearly too. So
I remember sitting at my kitchen table again, going back to that. There was a couple conversations we had there right before you left, or right before you moved back. And I remember sitting there in that interesting space in my own mind too, thinking like, having in needing, wanting to in order to be there, right, in those moments for you, right, like hearing you talk about that that resentment and frustration for Amsterdam. And whereas this is a place where I found an incredible amount of healing. That's another funny thing about life, right? Where I'm sitting there like, we've had very different experiences here, but I acknowledge your, you know, and like that idea of being able to understand other people's experiences, though, is important, though, isn't it? Like understanding each other's code. I think sometimes we get really upset at other humans, right? Or people in general do. And then at the same time, how complex is it, though, that you have your own entirely different cultural experiences than I do, right? And because of that, they've led to certain thoughts and conclusions and patterns, and to the point where we can sit here in this same city and have wildly different experiences. That's a powerful reminder in and of itself. And then we go back to the objectivity, right? Objectively, I think Amsterdam's a wonderful place. I've definitely had my fair share of pains here too, though.
But right now, though, like I am able to like let go of the bitterness, and now that I actually look back, I've had amazing experiences. So I think I'm, you know, kind of warming up to Amsterdam, and I'm actually excited to go back. So, but it's really funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't go. I want to walk downtown with you now and be like, so yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? Pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm very excited till that day. We'll see. I hope like the COVID situation gets better.
I know.
Yeah. But anyways, like it was so great talking about like this healing process, and yeah, it's just like redefining what hope is for a lot of the people. Like I also learned something new about that. And yeah, is there like a last thing you would want to, like an advice or something you want to tell the listeners about the healing process or hope or just anything?
I think I in your email you'd mentioned that I thought about a couple things that I feel like have become truths for me, if that makes sense. And that's the interesting thing about mental health is because it's so intricately entwined with our experiences. It's not like if any human gets a common cold, they can take medicine X and it's better, right? If you break your arm, everybody's going to go get an X-ray and get a cast on. And there's like one solution for some of those medical problems. The mind is so powerful and complex. Everybody who's struggling for mental health is struggling for different reasons and from different experiences and from different traumas. I think we share threads, right? Like in your and I stories, we have common themes and common ground, but there's still your stories and my stories. That's what makes it as frustrating as it does powerful, right? But I think I did write a couple of things down. I would always want people to know that intellectually, there's always hope. Which can be a really frustrating statement as much as it can be encouraging. Because if you don't feel it or haven't felt it in a long time, it's one of those things that I can imagine making someone just really angry.
Yeah.
But I would encourage people to mess around with hope, play with hope, think about it. What does it actually mean? What does it mean to you? What's your relationship with hope? You know what I mean? Something that somebody fearfully keeps at a distance, or is it something that you can cling to? I would also say, I think one of the key things in general to life in general, not just healing, is which I think you and I have directly and indirectly talked about for the last hour, is so much of healing, I think, is dependent on how we frame things. How we frame the past, how we frame the moment, and then how we frame how we want to walk in the future. I personally feel like true healing comes when we learn to frame all three of those in a more constructive, either objective or positive light. We can't move into a positive future unless we can reframe the present to be positive as well.
Right.
And then I would also, I would love to remind anybody who's listening, as well as remind myself, as well as remind and encourage maybe even you, Sinju, as we're talking, that if you're listening and you're a human being, based on the fact that we're human beings, we're brilliant, we're incredible, we're capable of so much, probably far, far more than we're well aware of. I think when I'm doing my best, it's when I'm living out that truth that I'm a human being, I'm incredible and capable of so much. Therefore, I should go do that and live that out. And then lastly, I would throw out, remember that mental health and anxiety and depression are not actually negative things. This goes with the framing. Someone really anxious, it's not actually a bad thing. This was a big shift for me. Anxiety is your body's natural response as a warning to tell you that you're in an unhealthy situation and you should make a change. Right. Depression, long term, after not making those changes, depression comes because we have just not listened to our body. The only mistake in the process is that we haven't listened to our body. And we have to forgive ourselves of that. And anxiety and depression is just your body screaming out, change something. And I think the more I've learned to listen to that, the better I feel like I've been equipped to navigate it. So those were just some thoughts that have been bouncing around my head a lot the last year.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much. Like, I've never really, I mean, I do study psychology and I do know that, you know, emotions are a way to kind of point out to a problem that needs to be changed, right?
Yeah.
But I never framed it that way with anxiety. And now that I think about it, I think it could really help me in this process to reframe it as something not negative and something that actually is pushing you towards a better environment, towards a better action that you can take, you know?
Exactly. If anything, it's actually a good thing, dare I say.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's like a megaphone just saying, hey, you're in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Identify what that is. And what it does is, when we look at it that way, we've by default naturally become the agent of change in our own story. And that's the point, that we are living our lives authentically and to a certain degree in control of those main choices, at least as much as we can be, that we're not the victims being tugged around by all these other people or things, but I can make what choice I think necessary in my life. And can kind of inflict back on the world, if you will, and push against it.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Sinju. It was so fun talking.
Thank you for being here and sharing your experience and your perspective and a lot of like your exercises and just advice. I think it could be really helpful and really empowering. Again, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. Like, this itself has been very healing for me. But
me too. It's good to remember all these things.
Yeah.
I forgot half of what I feel like just talking about it right now is like, oh yeah, that's a thought I've had. I learned that. I should
I should implement it more. Okay, yeah. So we should be agents of, action, change, and
exactly.
hold on to hope.
Hold on to hope. It's real.